All right, let's talk about one of the coolest, most ambitious goals in all of technology, building computers that are actually inspired by the human brain. It sounds like straight-up sci-fi, right? But as we're about to see, the reality is even more fascinating. So let's dive in.
Okay, so take a look at this number, 20 watts. That's it. We're talking less power than a really dim light bulb. And what is it? Well, that's the approximate energy it takes to run the human brain. You know, arguably the most powerful and efficient computer on the entire planet. Think about what it can do. It recognizes faces, it composes music, it processes language, all while running on the power equivalent of a light snack.
And that brings us to the biggest question of this whole explainer. If the brain is that incredibly efficient, why on earth have we spent the last 75 years building our computers in a completely different way? It's a fantastic question, and the answer reveals both the huge promise and the kind of harsh reality of a field called neuromorphic computing.
To figure out why we aren't all using brain-like computers, we first have to really understand what makes them so special. What exactly is the promise of this whole brain-inspired approach?
So here's the core idea. Neuromorphic computing isn't just about making faster chips. It is a complete, from-the-ground-up rethink of computer architecture. Instead of just following the same old design, it goes all the way back to the drawing board and asks a simple question. How does biology do it, and can we actually copy that blueprint in silicon?
And the secret sauce to this whole approach is a single, incredibly powerful idea. You unify the memory and the processing. You know, in our brains, the place where a memory is stored is the exact same place where the computation happens. And by mimicking this, these systems are trying to solve a fundamental problem that has been wasting energy in our computers for decades.
And that big energy-wasting problem? Oh, it has a name. It's called the von Neumann bottleneck. And it's basically the ghost in the machine that neuromorphic computing is designed to finally get rid of.
You see, for over 75 years, almost every single computer you have ever used, from your laptop to your smartphone, has been built on this one principle. It physically separates the brain of the computer, the processor, from its memory. You can think of the processor as a chef, and the memory as a pantry that's way down the hall. Now, in a traditional computer, that chef is constantly running down the hall to the pantry for every single ingredient. This constant shuttling of data back and forth creates a massive traffic jam. That's the von Neumann bottleneck, and it can waste over 90% of the energy in some AI workloads. It's just wildly inefficient. But neuromorphic systems are different. They put the pantry right at the chef's station. The computation happens right where the data is stored, which completely eliminates that wasteful journey.
So, if it's not shuttling data back and forth all the time, how does a neuromorphic chip actually process information? Well, it thinks in a fundamentally different way.
Okay, so your computer's processor is always ticking along at a constant rhythm. That's the clock cycle. It's doing work and burning power whether it's needed or not. Neuromorphic chips, on the other hand, are event-driven. They are essentially silent, using almost no power until a piece of information, in the form of an electrical spike, arrives. They only work when there's actually work to be done.
And here's how a single artificial neuron makes a decision. It's actually simpler than you might think. First, it just listens for these incoming spikes and accumulates their energy, kind of like charging a tiny battery. Second, if that charge hits a certain critical point, a threshold, then third, it fires its own spike, passing the message along to other neurons. And fourth, it just resets itself and waits for the next event. It's an elegant, super efficient, and very brain-like way of computing.
So when you put all of this together, the promised advantages are just incredible. We are talking about up to 1,000 times better energy efficiency for certain tasks. We're talking lightning-fast response times that are perfect for robotics, and the ability to learn on the fly. This could be a massive game changer for building a more sustainable AI infrastructure. So with all these amazing benefits, why isn't this technology everywhere?
And this is where the story gets a little more complicated. This is where that incredible promise collides with the messy, difficult challenges of the real world.
Yeah, this quote from a recent peer-reviewed analysis really sets the stage perfectly. Despite all the hype and all the potential, as of 2026, neuromorphic computing is still a niche player. Let's be very clear, this is not the revolution that's going to kick your GPU out of your gaming rig or out of a data center tomorrow.
Now, don't get me wrong, the hardware itself is real and it is seriously impressive. You've got Intel's Hollow Point, a massive research system, you got IBM's North Pole, which shows huge efficiency gains, and you have BrainChip's Akita, which is already being put into ultra-low power devices. But you start to see a pattern here, right? They are all highly specialized for very specific kinds of tasks.
And this comparison right here is a powerful reality check. Intel's Hollow-Point, the largest system in the world, has just over 1 billion neurons, and it burns 2,600 watts. The human brain has 86 times billion neurons and runs on just 20 watts. So while these chips are efficient for each little thing they do, scaling them up to brain-like complexity still requires a huge amount of power. We have a long, long way to go to match biology's efficiency.
But honestly, the biggest hurdles aren't even about power. There's an accuracy problem. When you convert standard AI models to run on these things, you can lose 5 to 20% accuracy. They also struggle with the kind of dense, heavy data that powers services like ChatGPT. But the real adoption killer, the biggest problem of all, is the software. There's no single, easy-to-use standard like CUDA for GPUs. Every system is different, which makes it incredibly difficult for developers to just jump in and start building things.
So where does all of that leave us? Let's bring these two sides of the story, the incredible promise and the harsh reality, together and figure out a verdict for 2026. The expert consensus is pretty clear. Neuromorphic computing is not a GPU killer. It's not a universal replacement. Instead, it's much better to think of it as a specialized coprocessor. It's kind of like how a graphics card, a GPU, first showed up to help the main CPU with graphics. Well, neuromorphic chips are emerging now to help with specific, brain-like tasks.
And this means the future is hybrid. We're going to see these neuromorphic chips on the edge. In your smart devices, in your car, in factory robots, basically anywhere you need low-power, always-on intelligence right on the device. Meanwhile, the massive GPUs and TPUs will continue to dominate the cloud, those powerful data centers that train enormous AI models. It is all about using the right tool for the right job.
And this leaves us with a final thought to ponder. We started by looking at the human brain. And maybe the ultimate lesson here is that intelligence isn't about one single monolithic architecture. The future of artificial intelligence may not be about a single all-powerful system, but instead a rich collaboration of all different kinds of electronic minds working together.